Don't hesitate. Start learning now, even the basics, even responding to emails to angry customers or what it just to your boss or whatever. It's incredible.
Welcome back, passionate investing community. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Joe Downs, a lifelong entrepreneur with ventures across securities, mortgage, hospitality, and real estate. We're going to talk about a lot of things, including self-storage. Definitely going to focus on some of the niches in that industry. If it's something that you're new to, I think this will be a real treat. And now it's time to welcome our guests. Welcome to the show, Joe Downs. How are you doing today?
Right, George. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
All right. Yeah, well, I've been thinking a lot about self-storage and asset class. It's certainly something that's growing rapidly, generating a lot of interest. So what first drew you to self-storage as an asset class?
Good question. It was an email I got at a very good time in my life. Well, it was a bad time, but it was a good time. It was a bad time because I have another business and we were going out of business, it appeared. And so I was looking for something else to do, what the next thing was going to be. I'm not out of business in my other business, but it was certainly a downturn because of forces we couldn't control. In either case, I had an open mind to it. As you had just mentioned, I have a little bit of a background in a couple different spaces in commercial real estate, but actually never in self-storage. I didn't know the first thing about it. So I got this email, and the subject line was "No toilets, tenants, and trash," and that got me to open it. It's not true, but it got me to open it. And or I guess it was real estate with no toilets, tenants, and trash, something like that.
Yeah.
Catchy enough that you open it. But there was a line and a paragraph in it, maybe two paragraphs in, that really caught my attention. It was because of the business I was in. And the line, it's something to the effect of 80% of all self-storage facilities are owned by mom and pop operators. And that was roughly 2016, maybe, when I got this email. So those numbers have changed. It's probably more like 70% now. But that is initially what got me to sit up in my seat and say, well, wait, what? And I started reading everything again. And the reason is because my other business, which we are very much alive in, but we realize is more of a hobby versus a business, is I have another partner. We've really one guy runs it, and we've one other employee. But we buy distressed debt. We buy it's not just distressed debt. It's charged off non-performing residential second mortgages. So when people who are in that space or attorneys, real estate attorneys, they stop and they think about that. They go, "What are you guys, crazy?" And that's what everybody said to us the whole time. But it's a very esoteric, dislocated, fragmented little cottage industry. We've been at it 15 years, and we are probably, I know we're one of, if not the largest buyer of residential charged off second mortgages in the country, which is a long way of saying we're a big fish in the world's smallest pond. So it's nice, but it was a hobby. It's very lucrative, but we can't control it. So I found myself in a 2 to 3 year window where we couldn't buy any of this debt. And so that's why I was looking for something else. And with a background in real estate, and in particular commercial real estate and debt, that's where I wanted to be. That's where my passion was. So this email coming through, it caught my attention and caused me to take the next steps.
Right. So I love that from many standpoints. I like to say no tenants, termites, or tantrums. But yeah, I went to multifamily for much of the same reasons. Totally untrue. It's
Yeah.
very
Well,
active.
tenants are our lifeblood, and sometimes they live
Yes.
trashed, but there's no toilet.
Yes, and if
You
you
know, you
have
know what
a
it is? There's less headaches too, right? So
right.
you're not a landlord, and I'm not. Please, anything I say, anyone listening, do not take this as a knock on any other commercial real estate asset class.
Yeah.
It is not. I actually personally invest in all of them. I love them all. I love real estate, but from an operational and management standpoint, me personally, I don't want to deal with people the way
Yeah.
that you do in residential because I've done it. So
Yeah.
we have less headaches. We're not without headaches. We have less
Right.
headaches.
Right. I'll go for the less headaches. Yeah, property manager for fewer tantrums.
Yeah.
But another thing that you mentioned, I think you're kind of getting in towards the niches there. People
Mhm.
say the riches and the niches, but you go for for the niches within the niches. So tell us why you have such a hyper-focused approach to your real estate acquisitions.
To
I
what we're
mean,
doing for self-storage.
yeah, exactly. I mean, for one thing, when most people think of self-storage, they think about other people's junk, but it's so much more than that. I know that you're in pro storage, and that really encompasses multiple
Okay, yeah.
different fields. So maybe you could pick it up from there and tell us like what are the subfields of pro storage and where do you particularly fit in pro storage?
Yeah, we'll love to. So, and you nailed it. I wasn't sure that that's the direction you were headed, but yeah, what I have found since I've been in self-storage, we've been 6 years now. We've acquired 20 facilities. 19 of them are what I would call traditional self-storage facilities, and one of them is a little different. And I got to tell you, George, every time I turn a corner, it's like, oh, there's a little niche over here, and there's a niche over
Yeah.
there. You got boat and RV, and there's niches we're not even into in self-storage or
Right.
storage in general. But one of the facilities we did buy that was not like all the others was down in Wilmington, North Carolina, and we didn't even know how to underwrite it the way we should have. We underwrote it the way we knew to underwrite, which was self-storage, and it checked all those boxes and it worked. But the difference was our
They
customers in
are.
this facility are not, well, they're people, but they're not residential retail people. It's not George Roberts who just moved storing, excess furniture or Christmas decorations or his grandmother's sideboard, she's saying, whatever it is, your life treasures are trash, right? But it's not that, it's business owners. So our customers are actually business owners, contractors for the most part. And then in addition to that, so 80% of
Yeah.
them, the customers of this facility are contractors in particular, but the other 20% were boat and RV owners or guys with some toy cars, right? So all of a sudden we were exposed accidentally to a niche I didn't even realize existed in self-storage, which was this B2B. Instead of B2C, it was B2B. And that was interesting. So for a number of reasons. One, I mean, I could describe the physical differences of the units. That's very different. They're very telling. They're much bigger with taller ceilings, and you can drive
Yeah.
a car, or not, well, car obviously, but a box truck into, or your work van or an RV or anything on a trailer, really, right? So not only is it they're bigger, wider, deeper, taller ceilings, bigger doors, but from a management standpoint, it was night and day. We're not dealing, you mentioned tantrums. I love that word. We don't have a ton of tantrums in storage, but you're still dealing with people, right? And those people are storing, again, their treasures, but really trash. And the incentive isn't there necessarily to pay if there's an issue. So you have a delinquency rate in storage, which is 4 to 6% probably on average. I think we operate a little better than that, but that's probably your national average in delinquency. Our delinquency rate in this Wilmington, North Carolina facility, which was called M2 Max, that we've since rebranded it, was zero. Why is that? Well, because think about what they're storing. They're storing inventory, tools, equipment, car. They're storing tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stuff versus hundreds of dollars worth of stuff. Right. So the incentive is different to pay. Plus, they're a business owner, they're operating. It's just we were exposed to it, and I went, whoa, this is interesting. Can we do more of this? And so we went around and started to try to find them around the country. We found 40 or 50 of them, and there's probably more than that out there, all over the place. Weren't successful in buying any of them, came close to one. But what we realized was, hey, there's a real need for this. And then there was another kind of light bulb that went off. And I don't want to talk too long in your podcast here.
Okay, okay. Well, definitely would hope to catch up with that off the air and at some point. But yeah, you're talking about things like toy garages too. I mean, that's huge. You got people with their nice automobiles. They want to trickle charge that battery
Yep.
during the winter and all these other things that you can't do in an ordinary facility. Obviously, they're paying a whole lot more, not hundreds of dollars worth of garbage, right? Okay, self-storage. This is one of the things you mentioned on your website. You have a very data-driven approach. And it looks like self-storage is set to possibly roughly double over the next dozen years or so. So help us understand sort of what's driving that growth. Is it recession resistant? Is it really as recession resistant as it's been cracked up to be? And are we possibly considering that certain markets are already overbuilt, is it overhyped, at least in certain aspects?
I would say in certain markets. So the one thing to
Yeah.
keep in mind, governing rule is storage is local. So I was just at a luncheon downtown today in Philadelphia, outside of the Philadelphia area. I was at a luncheon at the Union League about self-storage. And some of the panelists and some of the questions were talking about, well, everything they talked about was national, national, and average, and national. And I was kind of sitting there like, well, yeah, but it's local. So what the panelists were discussing were trends that we didn't experience where we were. So I wasn't gonna raise my hand and argue because there was no point. They were speaking nationally, but storage is really still local. So can it be overbuilt in certain markets? Absolutely. That's we use a supply index, which is a ratio of how many total square feet available to population, right? And so we know generally where that supply index should be. So you could tell if you're in a high supply index market, well, first of all, you'd be crazy to build there. But second of all, if even if you're buying, you have to keep that in mind because there's a level of saturation. So we're looking for markets that are undersupplied, right? And they're everywhere. What's driving that was one of your questions, population growth. But more than population growth, the type of population growth. So what I mean by that is the largest socioeconomic generation are baby boomers, right? And they use self-storage. They use it the way they're going to use it, and they're not, that's not going to increase or decrease. You might see some effect from them as they downsize or move, but they don't seem to be doing that, right? The next generation is Gen X. That's me. I'm 51 years old. We don't use self-storage. I've never rented it in my life. I'm your standard Gen Xer. Like I have an attic and a basement. And again, this is also because I live in Philadelphia, the suburbs of Philadelphia. If I lived in Florida,
Right. I'm in Michigan. I'm the same way.
okay. If I lived in Florida, or if you lived in Florida, or I just got off a call about a development in Arizona. If you lived in Arizona, we'd be having a slightly different conversation. And the only reason
Yeah.
is because they don't in Florida and Arizona, and there's other places, but there's two I can confidently speak of. They don't have basements and attics. They have attics,
Right.
but can't use them. Right. So I have an attic, a basement, and a garage. If I need self-storage, I personally, just personal, but I feel like I have a hoarding problem. Right. I could probably get rid of some stuff. If I lived in Florida, it'd be a different situation. I'd have to have self-storage because I wouldn't be a hoarder. I was just, I don't have enough house to store stuff. Just regular everyday stuff.
Right.
So it does depend on where you are. But back to the generations, the millennials, second biggest generation, they're using, let me rewind. Gen X uses it about 10%. 10% of my generation uses self-storage. The generation younger than me, 30%. The generation after that is expected to use it at 50%. Why? Number of things. They want to consume the same way we're consuming, but they don't want the McMansions that we aspired to as a Gen X, right? So my house is probably a little bigger than the next generation. So there's a reason that I don't need it because I probably have a bigger house than my standard, Joe, if you will, who's not 51 but 31 or 35. And then the Joe that's 25 right now, half of me are going to use it. And what else is driving it? So they're much bigger population trends. We also, not to get political, but we just got a population fuel the last 4 years, right?
True.
Twice the population growth. However, which way you want to say it came. Legal, illegal,
Right.
by plane, by land, by sea, it's here.
Well, we got to face the facts. It's reality.
Right, it's reality. So they're factor into the numbers. So you have that pressure, and then on top of that, and God bless our brothers in multifamily and even in residential development for building everything just a little bit smaller. So they're building apartments a little smaller with less storage. Everything is smaller, smaller, smaller. More of it, but smaller, which lends itself to self-storage. So you have the usage rate, the population, and then the necessity of it all driving. Are we feeling that today? Not necessarily, but we will be certainly in the next, as you said, in the next 10, 15 years. So I wouldn't be surprised if the usage does double, if the demand of it doubles.
Right. And I think you've mentioned a lot of things that help you to find these awesome deals. First of all, you mentioned the fragmentation, about 80% when you got into the business a few years back. You also mentioned you're going to the right markets that have a need. And in many cases, that's secondary and tertiary. I mean, I have my own investment thesis very similar in that if finding a great investment is like turning over rocks, you have to turn over a whole lot more rocks where things have been overpicked, like in the major cities and in industries where you have more consolidation. So, any other tips or tricks you have that help Belrose Group find
Yeah, well,
the
right. Well, I was going to jump in there. Population trends. So not
yeah,
just the growth of them, but where are they moving to? Right.
right.
So for us, we focus more in the southeast, but that's by choice. If I
Hmm.
was living on the West Coast, I'd focus on the Southwest because that's where the population trends are going. In addition, oh, by the way, you one of the things I didn't answer was you talked about whether it was really recession proof. So historically, it through every recession, this has been measured. Let me back up. Since around 2000, you might even go back to 1990, where they have pretty good data, but not great data. They have really good data on self storage from 2000 and on. Some data back to the 90s. It's proven to be, if you look at every recession, storage is not necessarily recession proof. It's just recession strong. So we historically, I've only been in 6 years, so I'm speaking about the industry, just knowing that the historical data. You look at it through recessions, it has much softer bottoms through recession. So it was the winning asset class in commercial real estate through all those recessions. That's
Right.
not
So
without.
contrast it to hospitality, which you've also invested in.
Yeah. Well, that's well,
Probably the least recession resistant.
that's probably yeah, well, I would argue retail today, but hospitality is certainly
Yeah.
taking
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
retail because of other exterior factors, right? Amazon. So, but what we just learned, and I want to point this out, what we just learned because it's never happened since they've been measuring storage, is how dependent storage was on transactions, meaning real estate transactions, not the value of the market. In other words, I don't want to say a market crash hurts storage. A real estate market crash is great for storage. And all you have to do is point to 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, that entire, however, wherever you want to measure it, that was fantastic for storage. What
Yeah.
was
Sure. People
bad?
getting, downsized or,
Yeah.
kicked out
Yeah, storage
temporarily, the reverse household creation.
Storage does exactly all of the above. Storage does well in great times because of abundance. We like to buy. Times are good. We buy stuff. We want to consume, and we don't want to throw it away. And it does actually even better during really bad times, where we learn storage is, and probably for the first time it happened, is can be tricky. Is during a time where there's no transactional volume in residential real estate, and on top of that we had a stagnant market. So I don't think anyone would say, I don't know, the last 4 years, we'll just say under the Biden presidency, measuring those 4 years, I feel like every 6 months we were headed into a recession, but we never really landed in one. And we could have arguments all day long as to whether we were in
Seems like
one.
the last 10 years. I mean, my
Right.
goodness.
It almost seems political, like one party wants us to be there and the other doesn't, depending on
Right.
or whatever.
Always.
So were we, weren't we? I don't really know. It depends on who
Yeah.
you talk to. But what we were is in a stagnant market, meaning we had high interest rates and they climbed 400 basis points in 1 year. And we had no real estate transactions and nothing really going on. It was just kind of like we were frozen, we were paralyzed. That paralyzed people, and those paralyzed people didn't move, and not moving
Yeah.
hurt storage. So 23 and 24 were some of the worst times to buy self storage. I will tell you why it's the best right now if you want to know. It's because we buy self storage, we buy trailing 12 numbers, and everyone's trailing 12 the last 12 months, not good. So storage is on sale. The other reason I would say it's a fantastic time to buy it is because in the next 10 years, if we want to start looking out, well, I saw a great stat the other day, and I'll give you to storage. 2.5 million businesses will trade hands, cash flowing businesses will trade hands in the next 10 years. Why? Because they're owned by people 65 years and older. Around 20,000 of those are storage facilities. So it's a
Oh, wow.
fantastic.
Yeah, makes sense because of the
Yeah.
lack of, yeah, the fragmentation there.
Mhm.
Okay, so one of the major approaches to value add in self-storage is technology. This is one of the places where technology can actually take the place to some degree of property management, right? I mean, you just punch a code and you get into the, you can drive in depending on the type of the facility. You punch another code to get into your, to your stuff, et cetera. All these things you can do with technology. Where would you say is the cutting edge? What sort of things are you doing that you think are going to become more prevalent in the next few years?
Well, you nailed it. Technology has already eliminated a lot of need for managers that sit at properties and do nothing all day long. Those days are pretty much over unless you're in a 4-story, very large facility. So, from the gate code access to renting a unit, and this is some of the differentiator we see and enact when we take over a facility from a mom and pop owner. So, when we're done with the facility, you can find it on your cell phone. You can rent a unit on your cell phone. You can pay for it with auto pay, credit card, meaning on your cell phone, insure it on your cell phone, right? So all of that on your cell phone. 5 years ago, even pre-COVID, let's say, I would say most facilities you couldn't do that. Today, I would say most you can. Or well, most of the ones that are operated by certainly the REITs and certainly operators like us who are bringing the technology to the mom and pop kind of style management. Going forward, the biggest difference that we're seeing, we're already implementing it, and I think you'll see is rate management using dynamic pricing. So think airlines, think, what's funny is this is one of my complaints about like StubHub and the whole seat market. They're not even there yet.
Yeah.
They're not using dynamic pricing. Think airlines, hotels. We now have that in storage. The REITs had it first. They were the only ones. They had their own proprietary software. We now have a company that we use I don't know if they have competitors. We use Veritech. Anyone can use them. And
right. So you have some seasonality there that is, I believe, related to the multifamily and other residential markets. When people are moving, then I believe you see an uptick in people requiring the storage. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And
love it. Dynamic pricing, huge. And then other things you can do, like what else are you doing? Like bundling services. How do you get people in when the times are perhaps a little slower?
well, that was the challenge, right? That's market driven. It's very specific to the market. But what we're learning and to be honest with you, struggling with, this is an area the industry can improve in, is how to marry local organic with digital. So you've heard of the app Next Door, right? It just seems like a place where people go on and they, complain, bitch, and moan about.
I was about to say, is that the app that keeps sending me notifications? My neighbors complaining about somebody parked on their side of the street again.
100%, right? And I'm using that app as an example that we're not using yet, but I think is that type of technology that's a local, right? That's going to give us the ability to market and advertise units there, because right now it's all SEO driven. And there's a company called Sparefoot that
Yeah.
you can you basically bid on what you're going to pay them to place a customer with you, and there's a customer acquisition cost analysis to that. The problem
Yeah.
is if you have a REIT in your market and they have unlimited marketing budgets, you can't compete with them, right? So it's hard for us as a boutique company to compete with a REIT on an SEO, right? It's hard for us to get a ranking if we're in a market with a REIT. It's hard for us to win on Sparefoot with a REIT, right? So one of the areas of growth still left, it's not mature. And if anyone out there is listening and wants to run with this, it's out of my belt or my skill set, it's that Facebook marketplace. It's the Next Door. It's anything
Right.
local, not
Hyper local.
what used to be Craigslist, right? If you
Yeah.
had to
Yeah.
rent an apartment, if you had an apartment to rent 15 years ago, or a house to rent like we did, we would post it on Craigslist. We don't have that. Craigslist is still around, but it's not this, it doesn't measure up to a Facebook marketplace or even a Nextdoor in terms of user functionality. And the millennials aren't on there. They're not on Craigslist. So it's that there's a vacuum in the market for local meets digital. So I'm actually interested to see if something comes out of that and something steps into the leadership position that way, like Veritech has for us, kind of smaller operators to compete with the REITs. Right now, we're missing that in our market. So it's grassroots. It's actually paying a VA to post on Facebook Marketplace and to post on Craigslist if you have units available. So it's still, that to me feels, I feel embarrassed to even admit that on a podcast, but because it feels so old school, and it is, but there's a vacuum, a void in the marketplace. There's a need for something like this.
So that's perfect. Kind of dovetails with where I wanted to go next, which is, what is one thing that people in your asset class are doing wrong that you do differently, or a widely held belief that you think is just plain wrong?
Oh, I got a good one, and we've been hurt by it. We actually had a manager that convinced us to, when we were buying facilities, the first thing you need to do is to raise the rates. So we go after facilities that are 15 to 20% below market, right? That's the mom and pop who's not paying attention to the market or doesn't care. So that's a target for me. So I want to go after that, and I actually teach people how to do this through a Scott Meyer Self Storage Academy. So we mentor people, we teach them how to buy, underwrite, source, underwrite, evaluate, close, everything. And there's a common misperception. We keep hearing it. People come to us, oh, so I heard what you do is if your competitors are at $100 a month for a 10 by 10 and you buy something at 80, the first thing you should do is go right to 100. And that makes, I can see why people think that. The problem with that is if you're not in a market that can absorb that, in other words, you're going to lose, people are going to move out. You're going to lose customers when that happens. If you're not in a market that's growing, where you can replace those customers, it takes probably 4 times as long to get back to where you were from a revenue standpoint if you lose too many customers than you made up for from the revenue, from the increase of the revenue. So, and we learned that unfortunately the hard way on 3 facilities all in a row with this one manager, and we got rid of them. But I hear that all the time. So we take an approach that's more, I call it boiling the frog slowly. So it's an example, if you throw a frog in a pot, I know you know, but I'll say it for your listeners. If you throw a frog in a pot, you crank the heat up, the frog's going to jump out. But if you crank the heat up, a degree at a time, very slowly, the frog will boil to death. And it's a very morbid example, but you get it. So that's what we do. So instead of
Doesn't even realize it's boiling.
Right, exactly. So instead of, think about yourself, right? If you look at your credit card statement with your storage bill hitting it, and you're paying 100 a month, 6 months from now it's 105, and 6 months later it's 110. We're going to eventually get you to where, if the market was 120, we're going to eventually get you there. $105, it's not going to noticeable difference for you. If you were at 100 and you open your statement, boom, it's 120. All of a sudden that's like, well, wait a second, that's $20 times 12. That's a lot. What's in that storage unit, hun? Now you got the husband and wife talking about what's in the storage unit. You just drew attention to your monthly bill. We don't want you to think about it, right? The secret sauce is like the Planet Fitness, right? We want you in.
Oh,
We want you to stay. We don't want you thinking about.
Have you ever been to a Planet Fitness? I've heard they've got thousands of subscribers to most of those places. And I went there once with my wife, and like the place is dead.
Yeah.
I mean, you can work out on any machine you want.
Absolutely. That's the model, by the way. By the way, anyone listening, have you ever tried to cancel a gym membership? It's not easy. I just heard recently someone is allowing you to do it online. I forget who it is. But for years, you had to go in. There's no way to do it, but go in personally. The first thing they do is try to sell you a different package. Then they shame you, and then they'll allow you to cancel it. It's never easy. And that's if you went. Usually, the mental game you play with yourself is, well, you're right. I haven't been to the gym in a while, but I need to start going again. I'll go next week. I'll go there. And then you get pulled again, and then you don't go. Well, storage is similar, right? There's never a good weekend to move out. So our customers are very sticky to a point. And that's the point I'm trying to make. If you just slowly grow the rates, you can have a nice business and no one will move out, or they won't leave you in mass. If you jack it, and we've experienced this, they'll leave in mass and then trying to catch back up, especially if you're in a market where you can't. It almost never, I mean, you could get yourself to a point where you can't catch up.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And very market driven. Occupancy, I think, is a huge question in real estate. I think not a lot of people are really focused on it in the right way. But yes, looking at that market occupancy and growth, very huge when setting rents. Well, I feel like I've got to ask you at least one really difficult question before we go into the lightning round. Can you tell us a story of pain or struggle in your entrepreneurial journey and how you grew through that?
Yeah, I learned the first time I have to tell you, I'm honest to a fault. So I'll tell you, I made the same mistake twice, even though I tell people don't do it. I did do it twice in two different businesses. If that makes it better, I don't know. To me, it doesn't. Same painful mistake. First time it happened to me, I was 30 something years old, had an opportunity to buy a bar because I had bartended for years. So I quit my job because, we're male and every male, rite of passage should own a bar, right? So I bought this bar and it was a bar, but was shut down and that's why the opportunity existed. So, but I had to bring it back as a restaurant, a bar and restaurant. So I knew how to run the bar part, but not the kitchen. So I brought in a chef thinking, all right, well, he'll mind the kitchen, I'll mind the front of the house. Things are gonna be great. And they weren't. And that was I was 30, 31 years old, and the kitchen put me out of business. Right. So I lost, 100 grand, which at that time was well, at any time is a significant amount of money, but at that time was everything. And I mean, you're talking, I've never been depressed. I'm a fairly positive person, but that was as close as I've been to, some sort of major depression. That was a tough time period. And I swore I would learn from that. And I have for the most part. I've already described that mistake, by the way, to you on this podcast. I made the mistake again in storage by allowing a third party, quote unquote, expert to come in and mind the kitchen for us. And the buck stops with me. I'm the CEO of the company. It's my fault, my mistake. I own it. But I did make it twice by letting someone else who I entrusted as the expert to know what they were doing with, managing our facilities and managing our rates. And it was a major mistake. And that's going to cost me more than 100 grand, actually. But that was early on. Fortunately, we're through it.
Yeah.
We have a fantastic team now. We've learned from those mistakes. We'll never make them again. When I stand in front of groups of students who are learning storage, I share this story with them. I impress upon them how important it is to know what's going on in your kitchen, whether it's an actual kitchen or your operations. Kitchen is my term for where the sausage is made, where the action happens. So I'm a front end of the house. I'm always going to be the front of the house guy, whether it's a bar or whether it's acquisitions. That's just who I am. That's my skill set. But I have to know what's going on in the kitchen. I can't divorce myself from it and pretend like, oh, it's in great hands with somebody else. And I haven't since. So the last 3-4 years, I'm well, or at least the last 2 years, I'm well in tuned in what's going on in our kitchen at Belrose.
Love it. Yes, an awesome quote there. Definitely going to pull that one out, maybe for the focus part at the beginning. But hey, let's hit the lightning round. Let's call it a super lightning round. I got 7 quick questions for you. If you could be known for just one thing, Joe, what would that be?
Oh, being a great father.
Okay, what personal characteristic has been most pivotal to your success?
Integrity.
Okay, got one random question for you here. Just tell me when to stop cutting the deck.
Now,
All right, I like it. Decisive. Most people go on for a minute or so. Which language would you like to speak fluently?
Spanish.
Yeah, okay, great. That's what I'm working on. I'm tempted to say English because I feel like I could always do better. Uh, what what is one tip or trick that investors and entrepreneurs can implement in their business today?
Tip or trick?
Yeah,
Hey, look, the cop out answer, or I'm sure the in vogue answer is AI, but I've been digging into it, and I got to tell you, I don't hesitate. Start learning now, even the basics, even responding to emails to angry customers or what. It just
yeah,
to your boss or whatever. AI it's incredible. I'll give you another answer if that's too much
sure.
about for you, but that I'm trying to immerse myself in it right now.
Love it. I used AI to prepare for this interview, and I think it was at least 59% accurate. Uh, do you have a top book recommendation?
Am I the right person you're interviewing? um, yes, yes,
No,
I
actually, it was
do.
100% accurate. I'll tell you the truth. It was beautiful. I've been using it a lot for things like that and preparing for, I've got to give a talk tomorrow locally. So yeah, there are a lot of great use cases for
I got
AI.
to tell
So
you, every question you've asked me, I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh wow, he really did his homework here. So it's
yeah, yeah.
fantastic.
Well, in the past, I have watched like hours and hours of interviews with people, and I still do that. But
You
what
don't
I
have the
find is
bandwidth.
that if I,
Yeah,
just ask, what does this person do? What are their challenges they face? How is their approach different than other investors in their asset class? And just asking questions like that, and the AI usually leads me pretty well.
yeah. I mean, it saved you, I'm sure, tons of time. Book, I just finished it and it's phenomenal. I'm probably going to read it again because there was so much in it. It's called The Road Less Stupid, and it's by Keith Cunningham.
Love it. I might as well just take this moment to plug my own book, Passionate Living Through Passive Investing.
Which is my next book.
It should be, yes, please. And then, yeah, leave me a review if you don't mind. I could use reviews, listeners out there. But yes, that's one of the reasons why we do this podcast, because I like to meet other great entrepreneurs. And, hey, buy my book. That helps me keep going,
Love
listeners.
it.
Okay, then one last thing. If you could just send us out with a quote to help forge our listeners as leaders and entrepreneurs in their field.
Yeah. Is it okay if I actually made one up the other day? I didn't realize I kind of borrowed two different quotes and
Yeah.
smashed them together, but it's accountability breeds activity success. So get yourself an accountability partner in life, in business, whatever, because as much as I hate being held accountable by somebody, let me back up. I don't hate it. It's just, you're like, I gotta answer to this, this person, or I gotta answer whatever. It feels like work, but it's that work. It's having to be accountable that drives activity, which is what we want anyway. That's really what we're doing all this for, is activity that leads to success. So accountability breeds activity, which breeds success.
Love it. Very beautiful. And I just want to make sure everybody can reach you. So email, carrier pigeon, website, smoke signal. What's the one best way to reach Joe Downs?
Don't have a carrier pigeon. And since you said smoke signal, I did go to Villanova where the Pope went. I'll throw that in there, which I call Pope you now. Joe at belroseam.com. So it's BELROSE, A as an asset, M as a management.com. Love to hear from you. Anyone who's interested in getting into storage themselves, I'm a junkie. Love to help you, point you in the right direction. We do consulting. We help people develop properties. We develop ourselves. So, love to hear from you.
All right.
Greatly appreciate it.
Just want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with our audience. Beautiful interview. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.